Sustainable development has become the mantra for the 21st century. In this series, Develop or Die, we're exploring how some in the developing world are beginning to believe that sustainable development is being used increasingly as a convenient argument by the richer world to protect their global economic dominance. In the first programme, we looked at the powerful emerging economies of India and China. Now we turn to two of the smaller Asian tigers. Oil palms dominate the landscape of Malaysia. Regimented plantations cover more than 4 million hectares of land, that's roughly the size of Switzerland, and provide work for some 750,000 people. Malaysia and Indonesia are the world's largest producers of palm oil. Malaysia is the largest exporter. The oil is used in woks and frying pans, in processed food products and cosmetics and detergents. Around a tenth of products in Western supermarkets contain palm oil. Last year, these exports were worth $13 billion to Malaysia alone.
If you look at the rural development in general, oil palm cultivation has brought about tremendous amount of growth and income levels, increase in income levels for the rural population. And you look at electrification and transport, the road that has been built as a result of oil palm developments.
Smallholders in Malaysia still produce nearly 1/3 of the palm oil. A government project helps 110,000 families to do so. The scheme gives poor landless farmers small plots on which to grow palm oil. The crop has helped narrow the gap between urban and rural incomes and slash the numbers of the desperately poor in Malaysia.
Now we are able to send our children to school, right through to higher education, for example. Then for us, before we could only afford a motorcycle. Later, we were able to buy a car. And now, finally, we can buy this house.
Malaysia has doubled its production of palm oil over the past decade. And although only a small proportion of Malaysia's palm oil is currently used as biofuel, this is still a very emotive issue.
The enormous growth of recent years has been very much a consequence of our decision in Europe and North America to go for a much larger proportion of biofuel in the petrol ration. So our policy has been driving change in patterns of land use and deforestation, you know, on the other side of the world. I think we have a responsibility there to recognise that decisions we take have these impacts far, far away.
The surge in palm oil production is already a major concern to Western environmental groups. They've targeted the palm oil industry in Malaysia and Indonesia with aggressive and emotive publicity campaigns, accusing the industry of destroying rainforests and threatening endangered species.
You'll find, for example, that Indonesia, which is the world's leading palm oil supplier, is the third largest greenhouse gas polluter on the planet after the United States and China. And nearly all of that is because of what's happening in the rainforest and in the peatlands.
Malaysia says in its defence that most palm oil is grown on land previously used for other crops such as rubber. And the major players in the industry resent the sweeping nature of environmental campaigns.
It's a great shame if the entire industry is painted with the same brush, and that is the thing which we often feel has been the case in some of these campaigns against palm oil, and that's most regrettable.
Now, if it's all about bashing and bashing and bashing without spending time and listening to reasons or spending time really understanding what's happening on the ground, it'll never end. And it's not going to help anybody because it's going to basically result in a lot of miscommunication. It's going to result in a lot of resentment, and at the end of the day, nobody's going to win.
The industry says it's now taken a giant step forward with the creation of a new initiative, the Round Table on Sustainable Palm Oil. It brings together producers, manufacturers, retailers and environmental groups to come up with a definition for sustainable palm oil.
This is the first time where you've had a huge multi-stakeholder process with so many different parties involved. They've sat around through dialogue, through consensus, agreed on a set of principles and criteria, which today are the strictest in terms of sustainability known for any agricultural crop in the world.
Teams of independent auditors visit palm oil operations.
No film of oil on the surface, so that's good.
Checking to see whether companies are protecting the environment and looking after the welfare of workers. Malaysia's biggest producer, Sime Darby, point out that they've received praise from some Western environmental experts for the efforts they're making, but they say that they're also aware that in the end, it's the consumer who is king and driving change.
Just having the product is not enough now. People now want to know where the products come from. They want to know how the products are made, whether there's been any, unrequired sacrifices, so to speak, in actually producing the product.
But not everyone is convinced that the Round Table is successfully curbing bad practices.
It's not just greenwashing that you've got, but you've got a fundamentally flawed system, because you can only actually deal with the whole concept of getting sustainable palm oil if the companies themselves are sustainable. You can't say patch of ground over here is sustainable and put a little certificate on the product, while at the same time the same company is involved in wholesale destruction of rainforests and peatland clearance somewhere else. That just doesn't make sense. So our demands on the RSPO, the Round Table on Sustainable Palm Oil, are basically, clean up your act.
The big companies are looking to do this by improving the efficiency of plantations and therefore relieving pressure on remaining rainforests. However, Western demand for palm oil is likely to continue to grow. That will earn countries like Malaysia more in export earnings, but is also likely to push up prices for people across the developing world who use it as cooking oil. It's a dilemma some in the industry say they're well aware of.
Palm oil by far has better productivity numbers compared to soya or any other edible oils. So the world, I think, would be better off using palm oil as an energy source. However, having said all that, we are also very concerned about this food and energy debate that's going on. And we like to make sure that whatever we do now and in the future is a responsible action.
Yet the future is just as likely to be determined by global economics, dictated a long way from Malaysia.
Europe has pursued a biofuels target with little regard to the impacts environmentally and socially of what large-scale plantation biofuels does in the communities where biofuels plantations are sited.
We Westerners cannot deprive the people in the developing nations from also wanting to improve their livelihood. It's a balance, and this is something which we have to accept, we have to appreciate. Okay, great. There has to be that balance. There has to be that balance in terms of development and protection or conservation.
The fact is, palm oil is representative of something bigger. The environment versus economic development. Crops for food in balance with food for fuel. Consumer demand in the West influencing livelihoods in the East.
The split between the wealthier countries, the so-called global North, and the developing countries, the global South, it's often portrayed as though the North is more interested in environmental concerns and the South more interested in development. And I think that's a misnomer. That's not correct.
I think we want to see this grain debate go on forever, simply because we only have one Mother Earth. We cannot afford to lose it.
For many nations in the developing world, the pressure is often biased towards development rather than sustainability. And now that their economies are more likely to fuel global growth in the next few years, they are more than ever questioning why they should be punished by Western-imposed standards. After the break, we travel to Vietnam and look at tourism, what's claimed to be the biggest industry in the world, and ask whether it can ever be truly sustainable.